good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. I want you to take a breath, breathe slowly, and think, for a moment, how many times in the last few days have you worried about something that hasn't happened yet for your children, for your health, for money, for the future, so things could go wrong? And as you think about that, you realize that there's a voice inside you that won't be silenced, a voice that tells you, what if I don't? It goes well. And if you make a mistake, and if you lose what you have, that voice is a name, worry. And worry is like a shadow that feeds in your fear, a shadow that steals your sleep, faith, and the joy of living. Today I want to talk to you about something that can transform that shadow into light. Trust in God. And I'm not referring to a theoretical or distant faith, but to that living, intimate faith, that feeling in your chest when everything seems to be shaking. The title of this encounter is No Coincidence. Stop. Don't worry. Trust in God. Because faith doesn't eliminate problems, but it changes them. It completely changes the way you experience them. And when you learn to trust, anxiety fades, fear subsides, and life, it makes sense again. Let's explore together 13 tips for living with faith. 13. Reminders that will help you stop carrying what no longer belongs to you. Surrender to God what you can no longer bear. And I want to begin with the first one, which is the foundation of all the furthermore. Acknowledge that you can't control everything, but God can. Most of our concerns stem from control. We want to anticipate, we want to prevent, we want to ensure it. Everything. And when something slips away, we feel fragile, powerless, lost. But tell me, have you ever truly been able to control life? Have you ever been able to stop time from passing? Will people change? Will something unexpected happen? No. And that's not failure, it's nature. Human beings don't. It was created to have absolute control. It was created to be trusted. When you try to manage everything when you give up your strength, you become filled with anxiety. When you let God be involved, you become filled with peace. Worry says, I have to solve it. Faith says, God knows how to do it. And between those two phrases, there's a chasm, because one is born of fear and another one about love. Trusting is not surrendering. It's recognizing that there's a greater wisdom, greater than yours. God doesn't ask you to understand everything. He asks you to trust, even when you don't understand anything. Often what steals your peace isn't not the problem, but your need to explain it. Do you want to understand why it happened? When will it end? How will it end? Will you solve it? And that's where your life slips away. Meanwhile, God just tells you, let go, I'm still here. And yes, letting go is scary, because when you let go, you stop. You start relying on what you see and begin to rely on the invisible. But that's precisely what faith is. There are moments when life in which your strength is no longer enough, and it is there that the presence of God becomes real. When you reach He starts when you can't go on. When you can't anymore, He can. If you're worried, remember this. You don't have to understand God's plan to trust Him, nor do you have to feel strong to let go. Hold on. You just have to say, Lord, this is too big for me. But it's not too big for you. Hey, every time you feel anxiety, repeat that. It's not a magic phrase. It's a loving surrender. And that surrender doesn't weaken you. It liberates you. Because trust doesn't mean everything. It will turn out perfectly, meaning that no matter what happens, you won't be alone. And when the Alma understands that, and worry loses its power. So this first. The advice is simple, but powerful. Stop believing that you have to do everything. And he begins to believe that God is already doing his part. Not everything depends on him. God didn't ask you to carry the world on your shoulders. He only asked you to have faith while he holds it. If today you are tired, anxious, or full of uncertainty, remember, your task is not to control. Your task is to trust. And when you trust, something changes, not externally, but internally, inside. Your mind quiets, your heart rests, and life slowly fades away. Regain your peace. The second tip to stop worrying is to have. God's presence in your life is very clear. Learn to give your burdens to God instead of accumulating them in your heart. Look, everyone, absolutely everyone, we carry something, a fear, a wound, a debt, a guilt, a worry, a loss. Sometimes we don't say it, but we feel in our bodies, in our shoulders, tense, with a tight chest, and insomnia that won't go away. That burden, it's called worry, and it's invisible. And the problem isn't having it. The problem is keeping inside. We want to be strong, self-sufficient, capable of solving everything. And without realizing it, we end up filling our souls with weight like someone who puts stones in a backpack you can no longer lift. God never asked you to carry so much. He asked you to. You will trust. And trusting also means knowing how to surrender. But what does it mean to surrender your burdens to God? It's not to say that whatever He wants will be done from a place of resignation. It is to say from faith, from that deep certainty that tells you, I no longer have to understand everything. I just have to rest in His will. Giving your burdens to someone is not abandoning your responsibilities. It's ceasing to live as if everything depended on you. Because when you think you're carrying it all, the weight becomes unbearable. And when you believe that God is holding you up, the weight becomes light. Sometimes we believe that. Praying is talking a lot. But praying is also letting go, closing your eyes and saying, Lord, this hurts me. It worries me. It exhausts me. I give it to you because I can't take it anymore. With just this. And in that act, something happens, not outside, but inside. Your soul, your weight lightens, your mind calms, and your heart breathes again. When you accumulate your burdens, you end up confusing resistance with strength. And there's a big difference. To resist is endure. Being strong is knowing when to let go. Strong people aren't the ones who, she never tires. She's the one who knows who to turn to when she can't take it anymore. And if she has faith, you know who to turn to. God doesn't. He judges you for feeling weak. God embraces you precisely because He knows you need Him. And every time you draw near to Him, with a sincere heart, without masks, without perfect phrases, something happens. Sacred, He changes your weariness into calm. I have seen it many times in people who told me, Doctor, I've prayed so much and it seems like nothing changes. And I always tell them the same thing. Maybe what needs to change it's not about what's outside, but what's inside. Like that. Because sometimes God doesn't change the storm. He changes a sailor, and that too is a miracle. Give your burdens to Him, not once, but every day, because why do we live in unnecessary anguish? Worries are persistent. They return. They disguise themselves. They repeat themselves, but faith. It can also be constant. Every morning repeat within yourself, Lord, today I ask you, I surrender my fears, my plans, my thoughts, my weariness. You don't need complicated words. God doesn't listen to grammar. He listens to intention. And believe me, when the soul surrenders without fear, God acts in silence, without noise, without haste, but always on time. It's not about doing less. It's about trust more, because some battles aren't won by fighting, but by trusting. If you are experiencing a situation that you cannot change, if you feel that you have already tried everything, do not insist on carrying it. Pause, close your eyes, breathe, and say, My God, I can't, but I know that you can. And after saying that, don't cling to fear, because if you do, you give it with your mouth, but you hold it back with your thoughts. You don't let go of anything. Give it up with your whole heart, like someone letting go of something heavy and trusting that someone else will hold it. When you learn to surrender to God what you cannot control, you will begin to feel something different, a lightness, an inexplicable calm. That is peace, spiritual, and that peace isn't given by money or success or recognition. That peace only comes when you learn to say, I no longer fight alone. The worry will always tell you that you have to do more. Faith will always tell you that you do more. You need to trust more. And between those two voices, you choose who to listen to. Sometimes the best prayer isn't a word, but a sigh that, it says, God, take care of it. When the soul learns to surrender, the heart, it becomes light again, the mind stops racing, and life regains its meaning. Remember, you weren't created to carry everything. You were created to walk together. And when you walk with God, no burden is too great. The third piece of advice for stopping: worrying while having God in your life is simple in words, but profound in practice. Learn to live in the present, trusting that God has already taken care of it. Your tomorrow. Human beings have a natural tendency to live in the future, to imagine what could go wrong, what might be missing, what might come, and in that attempt to get ahead of life, he ends up losing the only part of the time that truly exists, the now. Anxiety lives in the future. God lives in the present. And when your mind wanders too far, when you, filled with, what if this happens? What if I get sick? What if I lose? Remember that nothing, that still exists. The only thing that exists is this instant in which you are breathing. Jesus said it with a clarity that transcends the centuries. Each day brings its own worries, and that means each day has enough on its plate. You don't need to add tomorrow's worries. But we do. We live trying to prevent what hasn't yet arrived, to secure what hasn't. We can control, imagine what may never happen. And in that mental race, we move further away from peace. I have seen, to people who don't enjoy their food because they're thinking about what they'll eat tomorrow, who don't enjoy the company they have. Today they don't rest because they fear losing her later. They don't rest because they believe that if they stop, everything will collapse, and so life. They're left on pause, waiting for a perfect future that never comes. But when you bring God into your present, everything changes, because you no longer need to understand the tomorrow. You only need to live today with faith. Live in the present. Trusting in God is not irresponsibility, it's wisdom. Knowing that you can plan without obsessing, that you can anticipate without losing your cool, that you can have goals, without forgetting to enjoy the journey. God doesn't ask you to ignore tomorrow. He asks you to. Don't enslave yourself to him, because the future doesn't belong to you, but to him. The anxious mind says, and if things go wrong, faith responds. What if God does something better than I imagine? Every day you wake up, is it a new opportunity? A sunrise is a silent reminder that God, he continues working even though you don't see it. And while you sleep, he works in your paths. Prepare your answers, order your steps. Sometimes you feel that everything is still as if nothing changes. But God also acts in the silences. While you wait, he arranges. While you doubts, he plans. While you worry, he's already solved it. You don't know how it will happen. You just need to believe it will. I've known people who spent years agonizing over the future. What will become of me? What if I don't have enough? What if I'm missing something? But one day they realized something wonderful. Everything they really needed arrived right on time. Not even. Not before. Not after. And that wasn't luck, it was purpose. God doesn't get ahead of himself. Nor does he. It's delayed. Its timing is perfect. And when you trust that timing, anxiety loses its power. Live in the present with. Faith is stopping running and starting to walk calmly. It's looking at the sky without fear of tomorrow. It's understanding that your task is not to control the future. Your task. Sow the best of yourself today and let God take care of the rest. Look to your around. Sometimes a miracle you're waiting for isn't in what's coming, but in what you already have but aren't seeing. The air you breathe, the people who love you, the chance to start anew. That too is part of the divine plan. When you live in the present, your soul finds its order, your mind stops racing, and your heart begins to beat calmly again. Then you can say, Lord, I don't know what will happen tomorrow, but today I am in your hands. Hands. That phrase has immense power, because when you say it to God from the soul, the worry fades away. Surrender, fear recedes, and peace takes its place. Each day is enough of you. You live with God. You don't need to anticipate, guess, or fear. Just, you need to be present, because he is in the present. And when you learn to, trusting that your tomorrow is already taken care of by God, you can live today with a sincere smile, knowing that there is no There is no better place to be than here and now, under his care, within his time, in the perfect rhythm of their love. So the next time you're surprised, when you're thinking too much about the future, pause and repeat, God is already there. Meanwhile, live today with gratitude, because while you live the present, God is preparing your tomorrow. The fourth tip to stop worrying. Having God present in your life is this. Don't fear change, because every change under God's guidance has a hidden purpose. Fear of change is faith in the face of uncertainty. One of the most universal fears of humankind. We have all experienced it at some point. I long for life to remain still, for nothing to move, for familiar to remain, because the familiar gives us a sense of control, and anything new, even if it's good, scares us. But life, guided by God, she never stands still. Life is movement, transformation, evolution, and every change, even if it hurts or confuses at first, has a purpose that only time reveals. God doesn't change things to confuse you. He changes them to remind you. You're not meant to stay stuck. Sometimes the change you fear most is the one you need most. Maybe a job change, a loss, a goodbye, a move, an illness that it forces you to slow down. And at first you rebel, you ask questions, it hurts, but then years later, when you look back, you say, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. That wasn't by chance. That was by design. Fear of change stems from the ego, which wants to have everything figured out, but faith thrives peacefully amidst uncertainty. Faith, he says, I don't understand, but I trust. And that simple yet profound phrase can, to change everything. I have accompanied many people who came to my consultation with the same phrase. Doctor, my life changed from the blow, and I don't know how to continue. And the curious thing is that sometime later those same people come back saying, now I understand. I had to lose that to find myself. God's changes don't. They destroy. They reorganize. They don't remove on a whim. They clear the way for what? New. And although at first you may feel that life is becoming chaotic, in reality it is. It's ordering itself differently. Anxiety arises when you fight against what is already changing, when you cling on to the old ways, even though they no longer bring you peace, when you insist on keeping open doors that God has already closed. But if you learn to trust, you'll see that every ending is also a beginning, that every ending is just a chapter that finishes, so that someone wiser, freer, and truer can begin. God, do not move from one place to another without having another prepared. Accept that sometimes, before, to show you the new landscape. It asks you to walk in the dark for a while. No, not to frighten you, but to strengthen your faith. And it is in those moments of change that, when everything seems uncertain, that's when your trust is truly tested. Because it's easy to believe when everything is stable. True faith is born when you don't see you're on the right path, but you take the step anyway. There are changes we don't choose that come without warning. They warn us and seem to tear away something we love. But God doesn't tear away, He transplants. He takes you from barren land to a fertile one, and although the process is painful, in the end you will bloom. Remember this. Nothing, that which comes from God, does not take away what belongs to you. It only separates you from what no longer serves you. So, if you're going through a difficult change, and something has changed in your life, and you don't understand why, instead of asking yourself why, He asks me, why, Lord? And that question will open a door, because the why always brings meaning, and meaning brings peace. Don't be afraid of change. She fears staying where she no longer grows. She fears living in fear of what has not yet happened, because fear paralyzes, but faith propels you. When you trust that God's changes are part of a plan, perfect, the soul stops resisting and begins to flow, and worry fades away. It becomes waiting, and waiting becomes learning. I have met people who, after losing everything, they discovered that all they needed was to believe, and that faith was enough to rebuild themselves from scratch, stronger, more grateful, more aware, because faith doesn't prevent change. Faith teaches you to, going through it without breaking. God doesn't promise an absence of storms. He promises presence in their midst. And when you understand that, you realize that no, you need everything to be stable. You just need. Remember that you're not walking alone. So if you're going through a process of change, don't resist, don't blame yourself, don't be afraid. Be silent, trust, let go, tell God, I don't understand what you're doing, but I know, which is for my own good. Help me walk by faith while you arrange what is not. I can, and little by little you'll see that everything starts to fall into place. Not because life, not perfect, but because you learn to see with eyes of faith. God never, it will lead you down a path without a predetermined destination. And what hurts you today will be the reason why tomorrow. Smile and say, it was worth the change. I remember a man named Ricardo, 58 years old. He was a man who had worked his whole life in the same place. Company. He joined young, full of dreams, and gradually climbed the ladder until, one day, unexpectedly, he was told that he was going to be replaced by someone younger. He told me in a subdued voice, like someone who still couldn't believe what had just happened. Doctor, he said, I dedicated my life to that place. I was never absent, never late, never said no, and now they're replacing me as if I were an old piece. The day he was fired, he felt like everything was falling apart. Work wasn't just his. It was their source of income, their identity, their purpose, their routine, their security. From one moment to the next, the change left him empty, confused, with a mixture of anger, sadness, and fear of the future. Weeks went by without her being able to sleep well. Every morning she woke up without. I would stare at the ceiling and say, "Why, God? Why do you take away my joy?" Now, the only thing that gave me meaning, and as often happens when I needed it most, God seemed silent in his answers, but time, with its silent wisdom, intervened. He started moving things that Ricardo couldn't see. One afternoon he came to the office with tired eyes and through tears told me, "Doctor, I feel like life has taken away everything I built." I looked at him calmly and asked, "Are you sure? Did he take it from you? Or maybe he switched it with you?" He looked at me, surprised. He didn't understand. What did I mean? Then I said, "Ricardo, sometimes God doesn't take away from us. He frees us from what no longer serves us. It allows growth. And when a path closes, it's not punishment, it's redirection." A few months passed, and Ricardo began to help his son in a small family business, a carpentry shop, which was just beginning. At first, he did it just to kill time, but little by little he discovered something beautiful, a passion for creating with his own hands. He stopped wearing a tie, but started using imagination. He stopped having a boss, but he started having a purpose. And one day he said with a smile I didn't recognize, "Now I understand why God closed that door. It wasn't the end of something. It was a beginning of what I always wanted. How to surrender without losing your strength. I wanted to do it, but I never dared. That was its rebirth, a change that at first, it seemed like a tragedy, but it became a new beginning. What she thought was lost was just a transition. And that story confirms something that life has taught me. Many times, God doesn't take away what is good for you. He takes away what has already served its purpose. Cycle. Even if you don't understand it yet, when the soul matures, it understands that changes don't always. They arrive to applause. Sometimes they arrive with tears, but behind those tears, there's a blessing that is quietly germinating. God does not improvise. Every turn, every movement, every unexpected change has a hidden purpose. The problem is that we want to understand a whole plan when we're only on the first step. Faith doesn't eliminate the fear, but it teaches you to walk with it. It teaches you not to fear change, but to let yourself be guided by the hand of someone who sees further than you. Ricardo learned something profound. That stability is not found in, it's not about positions, titles, or salaries. It's about inner peace, knowing that God always provides, even if he changes the way he does it. And that also teaches us to let go, to not clinging to the old out of habit, not fearing the new simply because it is unknown, because everything that it comes from God and brings growth, even though at first it comes wrapped in pain. Sometimes change is God's way of telling you, you finished this stage, now I have another one for you. Even if you don't see it, that phrase implies an act of love. Because if God moves you because he still has something beautiful to show you. So if today you feel that life has changed and you don't, do you know where you're going? If a door closed, if you lost something that gave you safety, remember Ricardo's story. Not everything that seems final is the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of something you can't even imagine yet. Trust. God doesn't. It destroys paths, it transforms them. And when you learn to see change not as punishment, but as divine guidance, your worry will dissolve into peace. Because everything God touches, even if it begins through tears, it eventually blossoms. There are stages in life where nothing seems to make sense, where everything that your plans fall apart, your prayers seem unanswered, and heaven feels too far away. And right there, in that solitude, in that painful pause, is where true faith is tested. This is the fifth piece of advice. Trust even when you don't understand the plan, because God also speaks in the silence. Most of the time, we don't struggle to believe when things go well. Believing is easy when life. Smile when everything falls into place, when doors open. But faith can't be measured, not in the calm, but in the storm. Faith is measured when you pray and nothing happens, when you wait for a sign and there's only silence. And yet that is where God is. Work harder. Silence is not absence. It's another way of speaking. Only not everyone knows how to hear it. I've learned that moments of divine silence are not punishment. They are training. Spiritual. God is silent not because he doesn't hear you, but because he is preparing you. His silence. It's not indifference. It's construction. Imagine a gardener. When you plant a seed, you don't yell at it to grow. You don't demand that it bloom the next day. You simply cover it with. He plants the soil, waters it, and waits. And meanwhile, although it seems like nothing is happening, beneath the surface, life is stirring. That's how God is with you. Sometimes it buries you in silence, but not to forget you, but to make you bloom in the perfect moment. When life becomes chaotic, our minds ask, "Why, God? Why now?" But God, he replies patiently, "Wait, my son, this is not the time for explanation. It's a time of transformation. Not everything is understood instantly. There are pains that only acquire meaning with time, losses that become lessons, and emptiness that ultimately become the space where God plants his purpose. The most difficult thing about faith is not. It's not about believing that God exists, but believing that he knows what he's doing. Even when you don't understand, I remember a woman who, he once said, I asked God to speak to me, and he only answered with silence. And I said to him, "So what did you do?" With that silence, she lowered her gaze and said, "I despaired." Then I replied, "That was your mistake. God's silence is not to be interpreted with. Impatience is embraced with humility. God is not in a hurry. He doesn't work with human clocks. And when you learn to, accepting that, the anxiety calms down because it no longer waits according to your calendar, but according to your wisdom. Perhaps today you are in a stage where everything is on pause. Your economy, your health, your plans, your relationships, and you feel like nothing is progressing, but what you don't know is that God is orchestrating the unseen. While you wait, he prepares. While you weep, he takes care of things. While you worry, he solves problems. Silence is the cradle of miracles happen because when you can do nothing more, you surrender. And when you surrender, God acts. Worry, on the other hand, stems from the ego that wants to possess. Answers are not given, but faith is born from the soul that knows how to wait without understanding. Faith does not demand explanations. It is sustained by trust, and in that trust there is rest. If you ever felt that your prayers aren't being answered, remember this. No prayer is lost. Some are answered instantly. Others are saved for a wiser time. God hears everything, but he answers when your soul is ready to receive. Perhaps you may not see the point in what you're going through now, but the day will come when you'll look back and say, if that had happened, I wouldn't have grown up like this. And that day you'll understand that silence was also an answer. Trust. Understanding is reasonable. Trusting when you don't understand, that is true faith. The soul matures when it learns to rest, even without certainties. When he says, Lord, I don't understand what you are doing, but I know you wouldn't hurt me. I trust you, even without understanding. That simple, sincere prayer moves me, invisible mountains, because faith doesn't always change circumstances, but the one who trusts always changes. When you learn to trust without understanding, your soul expands, your mind opens up, and your heart begins to feel a calm that doesn't come from the world, but from the presence of God. Remember the silence. It is not empty. It is the space where God creates in secret. And when the moment is perfect, he will break that silence with an answer that will make you cry with gratitude. So, if you're at that point where nothing makes sense, don't run. Don't get frustrated. Don't abandon your faith. Just say, Lord, even though I don't hear your voice, I know that you're still here. That certainty is worth more than 1,000 miracles, because whoever trusts in the midst of silence has learned the highest language of faith, inexplicable peace. The sixth piece of advice for leaving. This is the way to worry while keeping God present in your life. Learn to be grateful even in the midst of worry, because gratitude opens doors that fear closes. Giving thanks when everything is going well is easy. Giving thanks when smile when your body is healthy, when your accounts are up to date, when the people you love are near. It doesn't require faith, it requires joy. But, Walter Riso, the mind and faith work together. Be grateful when your soul trembles, when uncertainty steals your sleep, when life becomes an uphill battle. That, my friend, that requires deep spirituality, because gratitude is not an emotion, it is a decision, a conscious choice to look beyond the pain and recognize there is still kindness that exists. I have seen people who, even while going through loss, have shown kindness. They manage to say, "Thank you, Lord," and not because they are happy, but because they recognize that simply continuing to breathe is already a miracle. Sometimes when you worry too much, your mind fills with what's missing and you forget all that you have. And when you forget what you have, you lose perspective, you lose faith, you lose peace. Gratitude is like a flashlight. It doesn't erase the darkness, but it shows you that you're not alone in it. When you give thanks, something changes within you. Your frequency rises, your heart opens, and your thoughts stop spinning in circles around fear. You start to look at what is there instead of obsessing over what is. That is missing. Being grateful amidst worry doesn't mean denying reality. It means remembering that reality isn't everything. Because while there's breath, there's purpose. While there's faith, there's a path. While there's love, there is meaning. Every time you say thank you in the middle of the storm, you are saying to God, I don't understand what you do, but I trust that what you do has a purpose. And that moves energy. It moves. Life moves faith. There are people who live in constant complaint. Why is this happening to me? Why should I suffer so much? And they don't realize that complaining only fuels fear. Gratitude, on the other hand, fuels hope. When you give thanks, you change the vibration of your soul. You let go. From asking for so much, you begin to recognize. And when you recognize, you receive more. Because God doesn't bless complaining. He blesses a grateful heart, even for what isn't. Understand. Remember this. You can't be grateful and anxious at the same time. Both emotions don't fit in the same person. Space. If you fill your mind with gratitude, worry finds no room. Test yourself every time you feel anxious or afraid, instead of saying, what if it comes out? If you're not doing well, say, thank you, Lord, because you're going to get something good out of this. and you'll see how your energy changes, because gratitude it eliminates problems, but gives you the strength to face them calmly. I've seen people transform themselves just by practice this habit. Women who, after years of anxiety, began to write. Every night they had 3 things they could be thankful for, and within weeks thoughts began to be lighter, brighter, more conscious. Do you know why? Because the mind can be trained. And when you train your mind to be grateful, you teach it how to see life with the eyes of faith, not with the eyes of fear. God loves a grateful heart, not because I need praise, but because gratitude is a way of acknowledging my presence. When you say thank you, you're saying, I know you are here, even though I can't see you. I know you're still working, even though I don't understand it. That attitude, everything changes. There are people who wait for the storm to pass before giving thanks. But the wise give thanks while it rains because they know that each drop brings a new seed, even if it hasn't yet sprouted. Watch them sprout. So the next time you're feeling worried, make pause, close your eyes and look inside yourself for something, even something small so you can say thank you. It could be your breath, a person who loves you. Lesson learned, a new dawn. No matter what it is, what matters is that your heart will recognize that there are still reasons to trust. And each time you do, you'll notice how the fear diminishes, how the mind clears, how the soul breathes, because gratitude is the voice of the soul that has decided to trust, even though reason doesn't yet understand. So today I invite you to practice gratitude as spiritual medicine. Don't wait until everything is perfect to give thanks. Give thanks, and everything will start to get better. Tell God, thank you even for what I don't understand. Thank you because I know that you are there, working, even if I don't see it. Thank you because if something left, it's because it's for the best. That attitude opens doors that worry closes. Because where there is gratitude, there is no fear. And where there is faith, there is no room for doubt. When you learn to be grateful, you begin to see life with new eyes and you realize that miracles don't always arrive as you expect. Sometimes they were already there. You just needed to be grateful to see them. They say that faith doesn't remove the stones from your path, but it teaches you to walk over them without fear. And this phrase that I want, giving yourself today, encapsulates that invisible power of complete trust. The one that, trust in God, don't run, walk with a firm step, even if the path is uncertain. Isn't that beautiful? Because when you trust, you don't need to chase after anything. You don't live chasing results. You don't obsess over controlling the timing or understanding every detail. You just walk with a serene step, looking ahead, knowing that there is a higher power guiding your steps. Even when you don't see the map, the worry makes you run. It tells you, do something fast before everything goes wrong. It pushes you, it exhausts you, it accelerates you. But faith gently stops you and makes you fall. She says, relax, it's not the right time yet. God is still working. And between those two, the quality of your peace is defined by these voices, the voice of fear and the voice of trust. When you allow yourself to be guided by the worry, your mind races, but your soul lags behind. When you let yourself, guided by faith, your body may move slowly, but your spirit advances surely. Learn to walk without anxiety. It is a spiritual art. It means moving with faith, not urgency. Acting from the calm, not from the fear of losing. I've known people who live their lives running, fearing they might be late to God's plan, as if they could miss out on something He has already prepared. And I always tell them the same thing. No one is ever late to God's plans, because His timing doesn't depend on yours, nor His purpose is hastened by your haste. When God promises, He fulfills, not according to your schedule, but according to your need. She knows when to give you what you ask for and when to deny you to protect you. And even though she doesn't, you always understand that His will always has a purpose that transcends your own. The phrase we meditate on today, it teaches us to walk slowly but confidently, because faith does not eliminate uncertainty. It only makes it habitable. It gives you the serenity to move forward without knowing how it will end, but with the certainty of that in the end, everything will make sense. When you learn to walk without running, You begin. Enjoy the process. You start to see details you didn't notice before, people. Things you didn't value before, miracles that used to go unnoticed. Anxiety. It makes you blind. Faith makes you aware, and the gratitude we saw before is the bridge between the two. God doesn't want you to chase after your blessings. He wants you to mature while you wait for them. And maturing means trusting their rhythm, even if you don't understand their speed. There are people who, in trying to rush God's plans, they end up opening doors that weren't ready. And when that happens, it becomes disordered, not because God hasn't heard them, but because blessings also need their time. Maturation. He who trusts in God walks, even though he doesn't see the end of the path. And that slow walk, being mindful, is a form of prayer. Each step is a silent declaration that says, I trust even though I cannot see. I walk, even if I don't understand. I hope even if I don't feel. And that, my friend, that transforms the soul. Because faith doesn't promise you an easy path, but it promises you companionship every step of the way. And when techniques to calm spiritual anxiety, you understand that the fear subsides, the impatience dissolves, and life it comes back lighter. Perhaps today you are going through a slow phase where it seems that nothing is moving forward. You feel that your prayers aren't reaching anyone, that your life has stopped, that the plans are delayed. But I want to remind you of something. God is never late. When you think everything is at a standstill, remember that he also works in silence and in time. He is preparing you to receive, and he is not in a hurry, because what's coming is worth the wait. Don't run, just walk. Do it with faith, calmly, with confidence. And as you walk, say in your heart, God, I know you will go with me, even if I can't see the end of the road. That phrase, spoken from the heart, is more powerful than 1,000 hurried prayers, because it summarizes what faith. Mature women understand that God's timing is always perfect. And when you accept that, worry ceases to matter. Power over you. You don't need to control, just trust. So today, hold on to this lesson. It doesn't matter if the path is uncertain. If you walk with God, every step, even the smallest, brings you closer to your destiny. He who trusts in God doesn't run. He walks with a firm step, even if the path is uncertain. Repeat that phrase when you feel anxious. Make it your refuge, your prayer, your mantra, and you'll see that while fear pushes you to run, faith will teach you to walk in faith. Peace. The 7th tip to stop worrying by having God present in. Your life is one of the most liberating. Learn to leave the past in God's hands, because what he cannot change, he will. He has already forgiven him or transformed him. Many live enslaved not by what is, not because of what happened today, but because of what happened yesterday, because of wrong decisions, because of words that cannot be erased, because missed opportunities, lost loves, mistakes that still hurt. The mind has a cruel way of punishing us. It repeats old scenes as if they were new. It makes us relive moments that no longer exist. It forces us to carry what no longer belongs to the present. And thus, without realizing it, we walk toward the future with our hearts looking back. But God doesn't want you to live looking in the rearview mirror. God, he wants you to look at the path. He doesn't judge you for your past. He uses it to mold your wisdom, because in his mercy, everything that hurt can become a lesson, and everything that losses can be transformed into purpose. There are people who don't move forward because they're stuck in the past. They feel remorse and confuse guilt with humility. But guilt doesn't make you better, it binds you. Humility, on the other hand, sets you free because it acknowledges your mistakes and he surrenders it to God to transform it. If God has already forgiven you, why do you continue to punish yourself? Why are you still repeating in your mind what heaven has already erased? God doesn't need you to. You need to learn from your past mistakes. He doesn't want to see you regretting things. He wants to see you reborn. The past can't be changed with, I regret it, but it's redeemed through growth. Perhaps there were decisions that hurt you or others. Perhaps there were moments in which you drifted away from God without realizing it. But even that is part of it. Plan, because God doesn't just work with your successes. He also uses your mistakes to teach you compassion. There are wounds that don't end with time, but with forgiveness. And sometimes that forgiveness isn't directed not towards others, but towards yourself. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean justifying what you did. It means accepting that you did it. You did it with the awareness you had at that moment. And now, with a new awareness, you choose to do what is best. The past is only one function, to teach you. If you use it to punish yourself, it destroys you. If you use it to learn, it sets you free. Every time you bring what hurt into the present, you stop the flow of what God wants to do today. Because while you're looking back, you can't see what's in front of you. And God, He is always in front of you, never behind you, when you trust that He is already transformed. What shames you, you can breathe without fear. You can look to the sky without feeling unworthy. You can say, Lord, you took my broken story and made it new. God is an expert at recycling souls. It transforms guilt into wisdom, pain into compassion, and loss into purpose. It just needs you to give up what still weighs you down. There are those who pray for new blessings, but their hearts remain heavy, tied to the old. And as long as you don't let go of the past, God can't fill your hands with the present, sometimes the greatest. A sign of faith is closing chapters without resentment, saying, this happened, it hurt, but I learned. And although I don't fully understand it, I trust it had a purpose. Don't live asking God to erase what happened. Ask Him to teach you why it happened. Therein lies the difference between resignation and wisdom. Resignation says, it's over. It's over. I can't do anything. Wisdom says, it's done, but I learned something that it will help you live in peace. And God wants that for you, not for you to resign yourself, but that you may be free. Faith is not just about believing that everything will be all right. It's also about accepting that what went wrong was also part of the journey towards who you are today. When you understand that the past will stop hurting, not because you forget it, but because you will have forgiven. Remember, God doesn't just give you a new day. He gives you the opportunity to start over. And that new beginning can only happen when you stop looking. You look back with sadness and begin to look forward with faith. So today, if there's anything from the past that still haunts you, get it to God. Say, Lord, I don't want to carry this anymore. You know what it was, how much it hurt, and what I tried. Do with it what only you can. You know how to turn it into learning and light. And when you say it, believe it. No, not because you forget, but because you trust that everything you've experienced has a purpose, and that purpose has already been fulfilled. God doesn't make mistakes with your story. Even your mistakes were part of their plan of love. And if you can believe it, you'll realize that there is no past so dark that it cannot be transformed by His light. Your past doesn't define who you are. What defines who you are is what you do with it, what happened to you. And when you decide to give it to God, He takes every piece, broken, and builds with Him a new heart, wiser, stronger, more. Be calm. So from today onward, when the past knocks on your door, don't let it in. Go in. Tell Him calmly, you don't live here anymore. God took your place. A few years ago, I met a woman named Patricia. She was 63 years old and had a sad look, the kind that hides 1,000 things, thoughts behind a kind gesture. From a first conversation, I realized I was carrying an invisible weight. It wasn't physical. It was something deeper, quieter. He told me, Doctor, I've been a good mother, a good wife, a good worker, but I haven't been able to forgive myself for something I did many years ago. And at that moment, her voice broke. She told me that when she was at 30, she made a hasty decision. She separated from her husband and distanced herself from her son for a while. It was a phase. Confused, full of fear, pride, and exhaustion. Years passed before she could to rebuild that relationship, but a wound remained within her, the idea that she had failed as a mother. God, He forgave. I know He told me, My son forgave me too, but I can't. That I heard such a simple and human phrase repeated many times in different faces. People who can't move forward because they keep repeating themselves. And if not, what if I had done that? What if I had acted differently? What if I hadn't lost him? We live as if we could turn back time, but we can't. And in that, the impossibility entangles anxiety in that desire to repair what has already been done. It happened. I told Patricia something I want to share with you too. The past isn't fixed, it's redeemed, and only God can do that. Transform what was a mistake into a lesson. I asked her to imagine her life as a tapestry. I said, from the side you see, there are knots, loose threads, stains, but on the other side, there's the one who sees everything. God sees everything. God does not abandon you. Learn to wait with hope. It fits into a perfect design. We see the mess. He sees the purpose. She cried a lot, and with each tear she seemed to release a piece of that burden. Because sometimes what you need isn't understanding, but surrender to the love that does not judge you. He suggested something simple, that she pray every night, but without asking for anything. Simply expressing gratitude for what I've experienced, even for mistakes, saying, thank you, Lord, because even my mistakes serve a purpose. Thank you, because today I can see that if what happened hadn't happened, if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't be who I am. At first, it was difficult. She felt that giving thanks for the pain was absurd. But as the weeks passed, something began to change. She started sleeping better. She stopped blaming herself so much. Her once tremulous voice, her voice began to soften, to become calmer. And one day, after several months, she said something I will never forget. Doctor, I realized I wasn't fighting with God. I was fighting with myself. God had already forgiven me a long time ago. A lot. I was the one who kept insisting on reminding him of my guilt. I kept that phrase etched in my soul. Because how many times we do the same? God frees us, but we put the same things back on. Chains. When Patricia understood that, something in her changed forever. She began helping other women give talks about forgiveness and second chances, to tell their stories, not from shame, but from gratitude. And what was once her pain became her purpose. That's when I understood. Another great truth. God wastes nothing, not even your mistakes. He turns them into lessons, into bridges, into testimonies that can heal others. That's why, if there's something from your past it weighs on you. If there's anything you still haven't forgiven yourself for, I want you to remember Patricia. No matter what you've done, God can transform even your guilt into freedom. He doesn't look at your story with reproach. He looks at it with love. He doesn't focus on what you broke, but on what you can build from there. The past isn't erased, but it can leave of hurting. And that is the greatest miracle, that what was once your wound can become your wisdom. If you manage to forgive yourself, you will discover something you may have forgotten, that you always were. Worthy of God's love, even on your worst days. And when the soul understands that, worry disappears because you understand that there is no mistake so great that it can destroy a willing heart to change. So today, like Patricia, I invite you to let go of the past, to stop punishing yourself, to trust that God has already taken it, already used it, already. He redeemed. Look to the sky and say, Lord, I no longer want to be bound to what I was. Teach me to live in peace with what I am, and believe it because it's true. God doesn't judge you by your failings. He judges you by your successes, times you chose to get up. And as long as you keep getting up, no past can defeat you. The 8th. Here's a tip to stop worrying by having God present in your life. Learn to talk to God every day, not only when there are problems, but also when faith is strengthened in the days. Closeness. Most people only remember God when something goes wrong, when the body gets sick, when the economy collapses, when fear takes hold, when love fades. And although it's understandable because pain awakens a spiritual quest, our relationship with God wasn't made only for stormy times, but also for sunny days. God doesn't want to be your last resort. He wants to be your companion, constant, He is not offended when you seek him in desperation, but he smiles when you also seek him in calm. Because when you do, you demonstrate that your faith does not depend on your circumstances, but of your love and trust. Talking to God doesn't require complicated rituals, neither perfect words, nor exact postures. Talking to God is opening the heart. It's about honestly telling someone what you feel, what you think, what you fear, sometimes out loud, sometimes silently, sometimes with tears, sometimes simply by looking up at the sky and saying, "Thank you." Many believe that prayer is asking is important, but true prayer is also about conversation. God doesn't just want to hear your requests. He wants to listen. Your life, your doubts, your joys, your thoughts, even your anger. He is not afraid of your questions, nor is he offended by your silences. God loves when you speak to him honestly, when you don't filter your emotions, when you are yourself. The same. Because true faith doesn't feign perfection. It only shows confidence. When you talk to God every day, you begin to build a living relationship. You stop seeing him as a judge and you begin to see him as a friend. And when God becomes your friend, worry turns into conversation. No longer. You say, "What am I going to do?" You say, "Lord, what do you want to teach me?" No longer. You think, "I'm alone." You say, "I know you're with me." And that changes everything. I've seen people who spend their days immersed in anxious thoughts, but when they learn to talk to God, their minds become calm. Less Aida, because prayer doesn't always change the situation, but it always changes the praying heart. You don't need to say much. Sometimes a single phrase is enough. Upon waking, "Thank you, Lord, for this new day." Or before going to sleep, "I surrender to you everything I couldn't resolve." God hears those small prayers as if they were big, because he doesn't measure not the extent of your words, but the intention of your soul. When you convert, dialogue with God becomes a habit. Faith ceases to be an occasional refuge and it becomes an inner home, a place you return to every day with trust, with tenderness, with gratitude. Anxiety feeds on distance from God. When you don't talk to him, the noise, the world becomes stronger. But when you keep the conversation alive, worry loses its power. Talking to God is not a religious act. It is an act of love. It's like talking to someone who doesn't interrupt you, who doesn't judge you, who understands you even when you can't find your way. The words. Sometimes when you don't know how to start, just say, "Lord, here I am. I don't know what to say, but I need to feel you close." And you'll see that your soul calms, that your breathing becomes more natural, deep, so profound that the heart stops racing. That daily closeness with God. Prepare for the tough times, because when the storm hits, you'll know where to turn. You no longer search for it like unknown. You seek it as if it were always there. Faith isn't strengthened by miracles. It's strengthened by inconsistency. In those small conversations that seem insignificant, but that fill your spirit without you realizing it. God never tires of listening to you. It is you who it's tiring to talk. So talk to him without fear. Tell him what makes you happy. What it hurts, what you dream. Tell him what you don't dare tell anyone else. Because with every sincere word, your faith grows a little more. Make your dialogue with. He found it something commonplace when walking, cooking, driving, or looking at the sky. Don't reserve God for formal prayers. Take him with you. How to carry a constant presence in your soul. And when you learn to do it, you will notice something beautiful. You will no longer need to shout your requests, because he will understand your silence. God doesn't seek perfect devotees. He seeks hearts, present. And when you present yourself before him with sincerity, his peace it dwells within you. So don't wait for a crisis to arrive to seek it. Seek it today in the calm. Talk to him while everything is fine, and when something breaks, don't. You'll have to find it. It's already inside you. Faith is like a friendship. How to let go of control and accept life. It's not built with grand gestures every now and then, but with small acts of love every day. So today, before going to sleep, don't review your worries. Review your conversation with God. Ask yourself, did I speak to him today from the heart or just out of urgency? And if you didn't, do it now. Tell him in silence, "Thank you for staying, Lord, even when I walked away." That one phrase is enough to start again. And when you do, you'll feel something different. A calm that it explains, a peace that cannot be bought, a certainty that tells you you are not alone. You never were. The ninth piece of advice for stopping worrying by having God present in your life is one that we should all engrave this on our souls. Learn to trust in God's timing, because what comes late to you, it arrives just in time for him. We live in a fast-paced world that demands results. Immediate, which makes us believe that everything that is delayed is wrong, that if something, it doesn't arrive quickly, it's useless. But God doesn't live in that hurry. God doesn't work with human clocks. He doesn't live by seconds or minutes. He lives by processes for spiritual maturity, for the preparation of the soul. Sometimes we ask God for things we cannot yet sustain, and he in his wisdom waits because he knows that what comes before its time can to become a burden, not a blessing. We want instant answers, but God is not an emergency button. He is an architect of the soul, and everything he designs he does with detail, without haste, without mistakes, without improvisation. That's why when something is delayed, it doesn't mean that. If it doesn't happen, it means that God is still setting the stage. Perhaps it's not that he hasn't heard you, but rather that he's adjusting the pieces, moving hearts, aligning paths, so that when the blessing arrives, it fits perfectly with your life. But we, being impatient, want to force what is not yet ready. We want to open doors that haven't been built yet. And when that happens, the frustration robs us of peace. I've seen many people despair because they feel that God has forgotten them, and yet, as time goes by, they discover that if things didn't happen sooner, it was because God was protecting them from something they couldn't do. See, how many times was God no, or not yet, actually a way of saying, "Trust me, I'm looking out for you"? Sometimes it slows you down to save you. Sometimes it stops you from maturing, and sometimes makes you wait, so that you learn to love without anxiety and believe without evidence. Because waiting is also a prayer, a silent prayer that says, "Lord, even though I see nothing moving, I know that you keep working." Trusting in God's timing is not effective passivity. It is keep doing the right thing, even if the results aren't there yet. It's about planting, watering, and nurturing. Even if the soil is dry, though it may seem dry, patience is not weakness. It is strength disguised as calm. Only the strong know how to wait without giving up. Only the wise understand that eternity is in no hurry. Sometimes we think, if God really wanted to bless me, he would have done it already. But we forget that God also blesses with delays, because while you ask that, even when things change outside, he is changing something inside you. And when your inner self aligns with his will, it will change. The outside world arrives at the perfect moment. Some people become so desperate while waiting that they end up accepting what wasn't meant to be for them. And then when things go wrong, they ask God, "Why? What?" And he, with the tenderness of a father, replies, "Because you didn't wait for what I had prepared something for you. So learn to trust. Don't rush things. What's meant for you doesn't need pushing. It will arrive when you're ready, not when you're impatient." I've known people who are grateful years later for things that didn't happen when they wanted them to, because they understand that if they had happened earlier, they would have ruined them or they wouldn't have valued them. God isn't late. We're the ones who arrive early. When you feel anxious about time, when you think there is no hope left, remember, God doesn't work with. Your watch works with your growth, and its calendar is perfect. Sometimes it asks you to wait, not because it doesn't want to, not only to bless you, but also because he is preparing your heart to receive. Fears of silence or delay. God's time is the time of love, and love is in no hurry. Look at nature. The tree doesn't worry about when it will bloom. It simply trusts in the season. And when spring arrives, everything happens effortlessly. So is faith. It doesn't despair, it simply waits, trusting that God knows when the perfect time is. So if something you desire hasn't arrived yet, don't take it as rejection, take it as preparation. God doesn't deny you blessings, He teaches you to receive them without losing your peace. And when it finally happens, you'll understand why. It had to be this way. Why couldn't it have been before, and why wasn't He the one yet? The most loving way God could tell you, I'm watching over you. Worry comes from control. Peace comes from trust. When you understand that God manages timing better than you will stop running and start flowing, because what arrives late according to your plans arrives perfectly according to theirs. Him. And when you accept it, the anxiety dissolves, and in its place arises a serene certainty. God is never wrong. With time, it only prepares you for what it can't yet sustain. A few years ago, I met a woman named Carmen. She was 55 years old and had a simple faith, one of those. They don't make noise, but you can feel them. She had been through a lot, a difficult separation, the loss of her mother, and several attempts to start over that seemed to fail. One afternoon, she told me in a broken voice, "Doctor, I don't understand why God doesn't give me what I ask for. I've prayed so much for stability, for finding a good partner, for having peace, and I feel that everything is delayed." Her face was that of someone who had grown tired of waiting. And I understand, because the human soul grows impatient when it doesn't see results. But a wise soul learns that God's delay is not punishment, it is protection. I asked him, what if God granted you everything you asked for the moment you asked for it? She thought for a moment and answered honestly, I think it would scare me. I don't know if I'd be ready. And then he smiled with certain sadness, like someone who has just discovered something profound without. Wait for him. I told her, God doesn't say no to you, Carmen. He says wait, because there are blessings that, if they come too soon, instead of healing you, could harm you. In the following months, Carmen began a process of change. She stopped focusing on what she didn't have and began to look at what she did have. Life, health, faith, friends, her daughter, her small business. Every day, she found a reason to be grateful, however small. She began to write it down in a notebook as if each the word was a seed. A year passed, and one day she came to my office with a different smile, a smile that doesn't come from the face, but from the soul. The doctor told me, now I understand. God wasn't denying me anything. He was preparing me. He told me that during the waiting period, he had learned to enjoy his solitude, to listen to his own silence, to rediscover his talents. He had stopped desperately seeking love in others, and she had begun to love herself. And just when she no longer felt anxiety about anything, when she stopped chasing after what I wanted, God surprised me. I met a noble, calm man who, she shared her faith and her way of seeing life. But the most beautiful thing wasn't the encounter itself, but the moment when it happened, because if he had appeared a year earlier, she wouldn't have been ready to recognize him. She still would have. She would have been hurting. She would still have been looking for someone to fill her voids. And God knew it. That's why he waited. That's why he made her wait. Because sometimes God doesn't change the situation immediately, because first he wants to change you within. And Carmen told me something I'll never forget. Doctor, I realize that God, it doesn't take long. We're the ones who want to run before we learn to walk. That phrase has stayed with me a lot. Time, because it holds a truth we all need to remember. Faith is not simply believing that God will do something, is believing that he will do it at the perfect time. When you learn to trust in God's timing, you stop measuring your life by serenity as a sign of confidence, minutes or years. You begin to measure it in processes, in maturity, in peace. No longer. You live in a hurry. You live prepared. Carmen understood that waiting wasn't an empty pause, but a stage of growth. While she believed that nothing was happening, God was moving everything while she felt alone. She was ordering her story from silence. And that is the miracle that happens when you decide not to give up, instead of saying, Why is it taking so long? You say, Lord, I trust that he will come when it's meant to be. There's an exact moment when what you want and what you need coincide. That's the time to God. And when he arrives, there is no doubt, no anxiety, no fear, only peace. So if you're waiting for something, an answer, a change, a sign, remember Carmen's story. Don't despair. God hasn't forgotten your prayer. He's just waiting for you to mature enough to sustain his love. Answer. The delay isn't a punishment, it's a lesson. And while you learn, it works. So instead of asking yourself, why hasn't it arrived yet? Ask yourself, am I ready to receive it? Is my heart ready? Are you ready for the blessing I asked for? And if the answer is no, give thanks, because God's love is also. It manifests itself when he stops you, because what he delays, he always perfects. Carmen waited, trusted, and when the moment finally arrived, she understood that all the pain, patience, silence, and loneliness were not. They were punishments. They were preparation. God doesn't make you wait to punish you. It makes you wait to grow stronger. And when you learn to see the waiting as part of the plan, the worry fades away. It turns into serenity. So if today you feel that life is on pause, don't be frustrated. God hasn't forgotten you. He is writing your story, only you're still in the waiting chapter. And when your blessing arrives, you'll understand that every second was worth it, because what comes late for you arrives perfectly, in time for God. The 10th tip to stop worrying and live in peace. Having God present is something that directly touches the heart. Let God be your priority, not your last resort. Most people seek God when it tried everything, when his strength was exhausted, when his plans failed, when the door closed, when the doctor has no answer, when the heart can't take it anymore. And yes, God always listens, always answers, always receives. But why leave him? In the end, if he's the one who can give you direction from beginning, many, they pray when the ship is already sinking. But the wise pray before setting sail, because faith is not a tool of. Emergency is a way of life. When God takes last place in your life, worry becomes your first reaction. When God is your first choice, worry loses its power. You can build peace if you only turn to God when everything is falling apart. Peace. It is built with perseverance, with a habit of giving it your all each day, even the small details. God doesn't want to be your temporary refuge. He wants be your permanent home. When you make it your priority, life begins to move at a different pace. You no longer make decisions. You're rushed because you consult with him first. You're no longer afraid of the future because you know who holds it in place. You feel alone because you include it in your thoughts, in your plans, in your mornings and nights. There are those who say, I don't have time to pray. And I ask them, do you have time to worry? Because worry consumes more energy than prayer alone. That gives you nothing in return. Prayer, on the other hand, recharges you, centers you, balances you. God doesn't seek. Perfection seeks presence. It wants you to make it part of your days, don't invite him to your table. Don't include him in your thoughts. Don't talk to him. Don't. Not only in times of trouble, but also in times of calm. There are those who live putting out fires in their souls because they forgot to maintain. The flame of their faith is lit. And then when the crisis arrives, they realize they didn't build a relationship, only a habit of asking for help. A relationship with God is not a transaction. It's a connection. It's not about asking, but about staying. When you act like God, your priority, everything else falls into place. Because when he's at the center, life is ordered from the inside out. It doesn't mean that no longer you will have problems. It means you will face them with a strength that doesn't come, not from you, but from him. God wants to accompany you, not just rescue you. He wants being part of your process, not just your emergency. Wants to guide you, not just comfort you. And that's the big difference between an anxious life and a life guided by faith. The former chases after. The solutions, the second one, walks hand in hand with God. When you make him your priority, you stop needing to control everything because you understand that everything in his hands is safe. Worry dissolves when you know that your life doesn't depend on what you do, but on what he ordains. And then you begin to live with a different kind of peace, a peace that cannot be explained, a peace that it's felt. Sometimes when everything gets tough, God isn't testing you. Resistance is asking, who do you trust more, your plans or me? And that's where the truth is revealed, because anxiety arises from putting our faith in unstable things. Money, people, results, control. But when you put your faith in the eternal, in the divine, in God's love, nothing, it can completely break you. Make God your priority every morning. Start the day speaking to him, not with repeated prayers, but with sincere words. Lord, guide me today. Make me strong. Make me patient. Help me to act with love. And at the end of the day, one day returns to him. Thank you for accompanying me, for protecting me, for giving me peace even when I didn't deserve it. That daily conversation builds strength, an inner strength that no problem can destroy. Because when God is your priority, faith becomes your anchor, the gratitude is your shield, and calm your way of life. Worry only has. Power comes when you forget who is in charge of your life. But when you remember that God is in control, fear falls silent. So if you've been feeling like you're losing control lately, don't try to. Don't do it all yourself. Stop, breathe, put God back at the center and tell him from the heart, Lord, I don't want to call on you only when I can't take it anymore. I want to walk with you every day. And when you do, you'll discover something beautiful, that life ceases to be a race for survival and becomes a journey of trust. Because when God ceases to be your last resort and becomes your first decision, the worry stops ruling your mind and faith begins to rule your heart. The 11th tip for stopping worrying by having God present in your life is one of the most difficult. Practice. But one of the most liberating things is also learning to let go of what you don't want to practice. You can control it because what is out of your hands is in God's. Human beings have a tendency. It's natural to want to control everything, to control the results, the people, emotions, times, words, paths as if life. It was like a chessboard where all the pieces obeyed our wishes. And when things went our way, we got what we wanted. As we wish, we become filled with frustration, guilt, and fear. Because when control becomes an obsession, it transforms into a constant source of anxiety. We want everything to be perfect. Let it be predictable. Let nothing surprise us. Let life follow the script we have written. But God doesn't work with our scripts. God works with purposes, not human plans. And sometimes what you call chaos, he calls readjustment. What you see as loss, he sees as loss. He sees it as redirection. What you perceive as silence, he experiences as time to sow the seeds. Learning to let go isn't giving up. It's recognizing that not everything. True stories of transformation through faith. It depends on you, because there are things that are beyond your reach, and no matter how much you push them, they will only move when God arrange it. How many times have we lost our peace trying to control it? Uncontrollable. Try and change someone who doesn't want change, forcing a result that doesn't come. Holding a relationship that has already ended. Try and understand what is only experienced, not what it's explained. And in the midst of that struggle, God gently whispers to us, stop. We're struggling with what I've already put in my hands. But we don't listen because we're busy trying to work everything out. Our strength. Letting go hurts because it means accepting that not everything is in us. Our power and the ego suffer when it realizes it cannot control the life. But the soul breathes when it understands it doesn't need to. When you decide to let go, it doesn't mean to stop mattering means to stop carrying what is not yours to bear, to give that to God. That overwhelms you, not because you give up, but because you recognize that only He has a complete perspective. God sees what you don't see. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end of everything. And when you trust His vision, you can rest. in the midst of uncertainty. Sometimes we want to push on closed doors without. We realize that God closed those doors to protect us. We want to keep people in our lives without noticing that He closed them. He stepped aside to make room for the new. We want to understand every twist and turn of the I walk when He only asks us to walk one step at a time. Letting go is not a defeat. It is a form of faith. It is telling Him, to God, Lord, I've done what was in my power. Now I surrender to You what I cannot resolve. And when you do that, from the heart, a strange, gentle, silent peace begins to dwell within. Not because everything has been resolved, but because you're no longer fighting what you can't change. I've known people who have become will try and control every detail of their lives. And I've also seen others who began to heal by letting go, because there are worries that can't be cured with solutions are healed with surrender. God doesn't ask you to stop acting. He asks you to stop worrying, do your part with love, and trust that He will do His perfectly. Remember, what you can control, do with faith. What you cannot control, surrender with peace. That is the formula for a mind. Don't worry. When life throws you off course, don't despair. God doesn't destroy. He redirects your path. And even if you don't understand the reason now, one day you will look towards. You'll go back and say, thank goodness it didn't turn out the way I wanted. Because you'll realize that if things had gone according to your plans, perhaps you wouldn't have grown the way you did. Letting go is not an act of weakness, is an act of spiritual maturity. Only those who trust in God. The truth can be said, I don't understand what you're doing, but I trust that you're doing it. Good. That phrase is pure freedom. It's the moment when the soul stops carrying the burden. That doesn't belong to you. And when the soul lets go, the worry disappears. Make this practice a habit. Whenever something worries you, ask yourself honestly, does this depend on me or does it depend on God? And if it doesn't depend on you, give it up. Don't hold on to it. Don't analyze it further. Just tell Him, Lord, this belongs to You. You know what is best, and let it go for real. Don't just hand it over to pick it up again 5 minutes later. Let it go so you can rest. It becomes lighter when you learn to trust, because God doesn't ask you to carry everything, only to walk with Him. So today, take a break. Think about what's keeping you up at night, about that worry you've been carrying for weeks, that thing you no longer know how to handle, and repeat to yourself, this no longer belongs to me. This is in the hands of God, and believe it. Believe it until you feel peace, because what you release with faith, God sustains them with love. The 12th piece of advice to stop worrying, having God present in your life, is this. Do not fear the future, because whoever trusts in God live in hope, not in fear. Fear of the future is from the deepest roots of anxiety. It steals our peace of the present with phantoms that don't yet exist. It makes us imagine tragedies that haven't happened. It forces us to carry the burden of scenarios that may never come to pass. We live anticipating tomorrow as if the future were a monster to be dodged. But the future is not the enemy. The enemy is distrust. There are people who don't enjoy today because they live trapped in the past. What if I get sick? What if I lose my job? What if they leave me alone? What if everything goes wrong? What if God doesn't hear me? Thus, without realizing it, they build such a great fear that it prevents them from seeing the blessings that are already in front of them. The eyes. Fear of the future arises when we forget who controls it. But when you remember that the future is in God's hands, and anguish dissolves like smoke in the wind, because God is already in you, that tomorrow you fear so much. He has already walked through the days that have yet to come. He prepared what you don't yet see. So worrying about the future is like doubting His wisdom. When you trust when He governs your story, fear loses its power. Not because the future ceases to be uncertain, but because you learn to walk by faith, even if you don't see the whole map. You don't need to know how it will all end. You just need to know who accompanies you. God doesn't promise that life will be easy. He promises that you won't live it alone. And that promise should enough to sleep peacefully. I've seen people get sick from fear of the future, living paralyzed by what might happen. But the saddest thing is that, in the end, nothing they imagined happened. They wasted years of their lives fearing ghosts that only existed in their minds. And when they finally understood that fear changes nothing, they discovered something beautiful. Faith does change everything. Faith, it doesn't give you all the answers. It gives you the necessary calm to wait, without losing hope. Because he who trusts in God does not live guessing at the lie, preparing for the future, to receive it with peace. Fear tells you, what if everything goes wrong? Faith responds, what if everything goes right? And that difference of thought changes everything. When you choose hope over fear, life becomes lighter. Your mind stops searching for certainty and let your heart learn to rest in the promise that God always provides. God doesn't ask you to know what will happen. He only asks you to don't think he's already there waiting for you. Every sunrise is a new opportunity to trust. Every breath is proof that God is still watching over you. And if you woke up today, it's because the plan is still on. Remember, fear paralyzes, faith propels. It traps you in dark thoughts. Faith opens the windows of your soul. Fear makes you think you can't. Faith reminds you that you're not alone. Sometimes we worry so much about tomorrow that we forget to live in today. And yet, the only moment we can truly feel God in the present. God doesn't dwell in your past memories or in your projections of the future. God dwells in the now. That's why when your mind wanders to tomorrow, return to the present moment and say, Lord, I'm still here. And that's enough. Fear of the future cannot be fought. With control, you fight with confidence. Because faith doesn't consist of knowing what. It comes down to knowing who leads the way. Sometimes anxiety about the future is a sign that you're trying to load a part of the plan that it's not your place. And that's when God silently tells you, stop getting ahead of yourself. I know what I'm doing too. Tomorrow doesn't need your worry. It needs your confidence. Because when you worry about today, God will take care of the rest. Don't forget this. Worrying doesn't prevent future problems. It only makes them worse. Faith steals a piece of the present, and it does the exact opposite. It gives you peace today so that when tomorrow comes, you will be ready. Face it calmly every time fear whispers to you. And if everything goes wrong, answer him. And if everything goes well, because God is with me. There's no prayer more powerful than that. Faith doesn't free you from uncertainty, but it gives you an anchor in the midst of it. And when your soul clings to that certainty, worry loses its meaning. The future isn't a threat when you know who holds it. So from now on, today, when fear visits you, don't reject it. Look at it with compassion and say to it, thank you for worrying about me, but I don't need you anymore because my trust is in God. And then she takes a deep breath. Because the soul that trusts does not fear the unknown. It embraces it with hope. Because those who trust in God do not live in fear. They live in faith. And where there is faith, there is no fear. Worry can take root. I remember a 62-year-old man named Eduardo. She arrived at the consultation with slumped shoulders and a tense face. Her eyes were tired. They betrayed a sleepless night. He told me bluntly, Doctor, I can't sleep. My mind doesn't shut off. I'm constantly thinking about what could go wrong. And so she began to tell me her story. It had been an engineer for over 30 years. He had spent his entire life planning, anticipating, preventing mistakes. That mentality served him well in his career, but not for his soul. I'm retired, but I feel like I can't enjoy it. I'm afraid of getting sick, of being alone, of not having enough money, of I'm going to be a burden to my children. As she spoke, it seemed like every word weighed a ton. I asked her, how many of those things you're worried about have already happened? He remained silent. He thought. A few seconds passed, and she replied in a low voice, none. Then I said to her, are you living off paying interest on debts you still owe? Be grateful even in difficult times. Don't they exist? She smiled, but her eyes filled with tears because she knew it was true. She had spent the last. years imagining a dark future, without realizing that his fear was aging faster than time itself. I propose an exercise. Every night, before we go to sleep, instead of reviewing everything, what could possibly go wrong? He asked her to say 3 simple words. I trust in you and no one else. No explanations, no requests, no plans, just that. I trust you. I asked him that he would say it calmly, like someone surrendering, like someone releasing the burden of a heavy day into someone's hands. Who knows what to do with it? At first, Eduardo was skeptical. He told me, Doctor, it sounds very simple. And I replied, God doesn't need speeches, he needs sincerity. The days passed. The first week he was still restless. The second one started sleeping a little better. And the third one arrived smiling and told me, for the first time in years, I fell asleep without thinking about tomorrow. I asked him what had changed, and he answered something beautiful. I realized that even though I don't know what's going to happen, God does. And if he's already in my future, I have nothing to fear. Since then, every time, when anxiety visited him, he repeated his prayer, I trust in you. And little by little his life began to transform. She stopped reading news that only fueled fear. She began to enjoy the little things. Things, a peaceful breakfast, a conversation with his granddaughter, the sun, entering through the window. She began to laugh more, to breathe slowly, to stop, to fight against time. He told me one day, before he was afraid of what might come, but now I'm thrilled to think that tomorrow also belongs to God. That phrase struck me as incredibly wise, infinite, because when you manage to see the future with faith, anxiety transforms. In hope, Eduardo understood something many forget. We don't need to know the future. We just need to know the God who sustains him. And from then on, every time she asks how he is, and he answers with a calm smile, I don't know what will happen, but I know who's coming with me. That answer pretty much sums up what it's like to live without fear. It doesn't mean the future is no longer uncertain. It means you're no longer afraid because you know you're not alone. The fear of tomorrow dissolves when the soul rests in confidence, when you understand that the future is not against you, not for you, but for your benefit, because it is directed by a God who only knows how to love. And that is the highest point of faith is not seeking control, but resting. The future, there will always be mysteries, but if you surrender your life to God, the mysteries will disappear. They cease to be a threat and become a promise. Eduardo taught me something I still cherish today. That true freedom doesn't come when you have everything secured, but when you stop fearing what hasn't happened yet. And if you feel that unease today, if you fear what may come, do the same as him. Before going to sleep, close your eyes and silently say, I trust you. And when you do, say it. Don't repeat out of habit. Say it like someone giving, like someone dropping, the weight in his Father's hands. And you'll see what Eduardo discovered, that sleeping trusting in God is waking up, without fear, because tomorrow doesn't belong to your anxiety. It belongs to his plan. And when you understand this, the soul learns to rest, not in certainty, but in trust. There are phrases that not only they read, they feel, and this is one of them. Faith doesn't erase fears, but it teaches us to look beyond them. How many times have we believed that having faith, it means not feeling fear, as if believing in God were a kind of shield that makes us immune to doubt or to the anguish? But it's not like that. Faith doesn't eliminate fear, it transforms it. Faith doesn't take away the night. It teaches you to light a lamp. This phrase encapsulates one of the deepest truths of the spiritual life. Fear is human, but faith is divine, and when the two meet, there is no doubt. They destroy each other. They balance each other out. Fear reminds you that you need support. Faith reminds you that you already have that support. Fear paralyzes you. Faith propels you. Fear makes you focus on what's missing. Faith teaches you to see what's there. You can still achieve it. Many times people say, I want to have faith, but I can't stop being afraid. And the answer isn't in eliminating fear, but in lifting your gaze to above him. Fear looks down at the ground, at danger, at the uncertain. Faith looks upward, to God, to purpose, to hope. And when you change the direction of your gaze, you change your experience. I remember accompanying many people through difficult times. Really scary. Difficult medical diagnoses, sudden losses, crises, family situations, situations where no one can control the outcome. And however, those who manage to maintain their faith do not live without fear. They live above it. Fear. They walk through the same storm, but with an invisible umbrella. Trust in God. That phrase, faith, is not. It erases fears, but teaches us to look beyond them. It teaches us that spiritual maturity is not about pretending to be strong, but about choosing with whom we face our weaknesses. When you trust in God, you don't deny you navigate emotions with peace. You know the fear is there, but you also know who doesn't have the final say. Faith doesn't prevent the fall, but assures you that you won't fall alone. Faith doesn't dispel the darkness, but it teaches you to see stars in the midst of it all. And that changes everything. Sometimes we ask God to take away our fear, and instead He gives us courage. We ask Him to eliminate the storm, and He gives us an inner refuge to endure it. We ask that the problem disappear, and it teaches us to face it with serenity. Because faith doesn't change the circumstances. It changes a human being. It goes through them. When faith becomes a part of you, you don't live waiting for the world will cease to be uncertain. You live trusting that even though it changes, God, it remains the same. And that brings us profound peace that fear no longer affects you. He dominates. He only visits you. And when He arrives, instead of fighting Him, you look at Him and you tell Him, I know you exist, but you no longer rule here. My faith rules more than you. That answer, though it may seem simple, is an act of spiritual power. It's like light a candle in the middle of the night. The darkness doesn't disappear immediately, but the light begins to spread. Faith doesn't ask you to be brave all the time. It asks you to never stop believing, even when you're afraid. It asks you to keep walking even if your legs tremble. He asks you to keep praying even though. Let your voice tremble. God doesn't seek fearless heroes. He seeks hearts, willing to trust even in the face of uncertainty. Because in that silent trust lies true trust. Strength. Fear will always want to scream in your ear. And if everything goes wrong, but faith whispers in the heart. If God is with you, you don't need to know how. Just keep going. And that, when you hear her voice, it gives you back your breath. It calms you. It fills you with a gentle certainty. The certainty that no matter how high the wave, God will be there. It always walks ahead of you. So when you feel afraid, don't blame yourself. Just remember to look higher. Fear looks at the problem. Faith looks to the Creator. And when you look to Him, the fear loses its power because confidence overcomes it. Save this phrase as a spiritual shield. Faith doesn't erase fears, but it teaches you to look above them. Repeat it. When your heart races, when your mind is filled with yes, repeat it until let your soul create it. Because when you manage to look beyond fear, you will see that which was always there, God guiding you in silence. The 13th. The advice to stop worrying by having God present in your life is perhaps one of the most profound and challenging. Let God be your guide, not your fear. Because even though we don't say it out loud, sometimes our decisions don't stem from faith, but from fear. Fear of losing, fear of making mistakes, fear of suffering, fear of not being enough. And when the fear takes over, life becomes small. We make decisions to avoid pain, not to seek purpose. And so, without realizing it, we move away from serenity because fear does not guide. He pushes. But when you let God guide you, you don't need to push anything. Just walk calmly because His will guide you. Willpower doesn't lead you where you shouldn't be. Fear makes you live defensively. God teaches you to live with trust. Fear builds walls. God opens paths. Fear makes you doubt. God gives you direction. Learn to let His will guide your steps. This doesn't mean living passively, but living with discernment, It means acting from peace, not from urgency. God, He doesn't want you to make impulsive decisions. He wants you to make inspired decisions. And that inspiration comes when you silence the noise of fear and listen to the voice of faith. But to do that, you have to do something that not everyone knows how to do. They dare to do it. To surrender and give up is not to lose. It is to trust. Trust that even when you don't understand what's happening, God does. He understands. When your guide is fear, you interpret everything as a threat. When your guide is God, you interpret everything as an opportunity. I've seen people who lived paralyzed by fear of failure, and when they decided to let go, God guided her steps, and the path began to open up in unexpected ways. Not because life became perfect, but because their hearts changed direction. They no longer asked, "What if everything goes wrong?" They asked, "What if God?" Conclusion: trusting in God is inner freedom. Is God preparing something better? And that question changes everything. God's will doesn't always align with ours desires, but always coincides with what we need, because He doesn't give what you ask. You receive what will help you grow. And that sometimes hurts. Blessings come, shrouded in loss. There are paths that only appear when others close, and there are silences that only exist to redirect your life towards something greater. When you trust in God's will, you don't need to understand, you just need to remain. And in that permanence, there is peace. Mature faith doesn't ask for explanations. It asks direction. It says, "Lord, don't tell me why. Show me what for." That prayer, it transforms worry into serenity. Because instead of fighting against what happens, you learn to flow with what must, to be. Sometimes, when everything falls apart, it's not that God is punishing you. It's moving the pieces of your life around to protect you from something you can't see. What seems like an obstacle today, tomorrow, it will reveal itself as a detour that saved you. Trusting in His will doesn't mean that you'll always love the journey. It means that even when it hurts, you'll know there's something there. Purpose. When you let fear guide you, your mind fills with what ifs. What if I fail? What if I lose? What if I'm left alone? And even if I don't succeed? But when you let God guide you, your soul is filled with even though. Even if I fail, He will hold me up. Even if I lose, I will learn something. Even if I fall short, He'll be with me alone. Even if I don't understand, He knows what He's doing. Do you see the difference? Fear seeks certainty. Faith seeks direction. And when faith guides, life becomes filled with anxiety. But when faith guides, life becomes full of meaning. God doesn't promise easy paths. He promises accompaniment. Perfect. It doesn't guarantee you'll avoid the storms, but it promises to keep you inside of them with you. And when you understand that, worry transforms into trust. Let yourself be guided by the will. God's will also means accepting that you can't control everything, that there are moments when all you can say is, "Lord, I don't know where you're leading me, but I'll go." And when you say it from the heart, the soul finds rest, because worry is a form of resistance, and faith is a form of surrender. The soul that surrenders does not give up. It is liberated. So today I invite you to look at your life honestly. Are you making decisions from fear or from trust? Are you running away or moving forward? Are you obeying fear or listening to God? Don't let fear be your compass. Fear points toward danger. God points toward purpose. Whenever you feel uncertain, pause, close your eyes and say, "Lord, not my will, but yours be done, for yours always leads me to peace." And trust, because even if the path is not clear, God never loses the direction. And when His will guide your life, fear ceases to rule and your soul finally rests. At this point in your journey, if you have followed every piece of advice with an open heart, you'll have already noticed something beautiful. Worry dissolves not because the problems not disappear, but because you have learned to look at life from a different perspective. You no longer look from fear. You look from faith. You no longer speak from urgency. You speak from calm. You no longer walk alone. God walks with you, God's constant presence. Each piece of advice has been a seed, and together they have been planted. They form a garden of peace, an inner space where the soul can finally take a break. Think for a moment about everything you've learned so far. You learned that faith is not the absence of problems. It is a certainty that you are not alone, only when you face them. You learn that gratitude, even in the midst of pain, opens doors that fear closes because gratitude doesn't change circumstances. It changes a heart that experiences them. You learn that the silence of God is not forgetfulness. He is preparation. When he is silent, he does not go away. He draws near to work without distractions. You learn that God's timing is not your timing, and that what comes late for you, it arrives just in time for him. You learn that the past has no power when you surrender it to God, because touching it transforms it. You are no longer your mistakes. You are the lesson they teach. They left. You learn that faith isn't lived only in difficult times, but in ordinary days. That talking to God is an obligation. It's a need of the soul. You learn that letting go isn't, not to lose, but to release the weight of what you never had the right to control. You learn that fear of the future is overcome with confidence, because whoever has confidence in God, you don't need certainties, just companionship. You learn that the will of God doesn't limit you. He liberates you, and when you stop being guided by fear, you discover paths you didn't even know existed. Each of these truths, it's a step, and each step has brought you a little closer to peace, because the path of faith is not measured in kilometers, but in surrenders. Every time you let go of something that worries you and put it in God's hands, you move forward. Every time you choose to be grateful instead of complaining, you move forward. Every time, when you choose to trust instead of control, you move forward. And without realizing it, one day, you wake up different. Not because the problems have disappeared, but because they no longer have the power to take you away from your life. Calmness, that is trusting in God, that is living without anxiety. Life will go on, bringing challenges because growing up involves movement and the soul needs to be stretched to become strong. But the difference lies in where they start from. You face them. Before you face them out of fear, now out of faith. Before, you used to say, I can't take any more. Now you say, with God, I can take one more day. Before, you used to seek control. Now you're learning to flow. And in that subtle yet powerful shift, life begins to take on a different light. Look back with gratitude. Every story you heard, every phrase, every moment you meditated, every pause you made has been part of your spiritual process. You have understood that worry is a silent thief of peace, but that faith, it is an inexhaustible source of serenity. You have understood that you cannot avoid the storms come, but you can choose under what umbrella to live through them. And when that umbrella is called God, the rain stops. It goes from being a threat to a blessing. Therefore, each piece of advice above is not a commandment, but a reminder, a compass for dark days. When fear arrives, remember the advice to trust in the silence. When your mind is filled with doubts, remember the advice to be grateful. When the future worries you, remember the advice to wait for the right time. God, when the past haunts you, remember the advice to let go and forgive yourself. When you feel like everything is falling apart, remember the advice of let yourself be guided by his will. Because faith isn't about understanding, it's about surrendering. And when the soul surrenders, it rests. Not because your problems disappear, but because you no longer fight them alone. Today you can say with serenity, I've learned to live by trusting, not controlling. I've learned to look at the sky, not the storm. I've learned to release the anxiety and embrace the peace that only comes from God. And if this is the end of it, the journey has transformed you, I invite you to continue, because there are still 2 more lessons, 2 final pearls they close this message with hearts full of hope. Elamardo's advice. He will speak of the power of forgiveness and finding rest for the soul in divine compassion. And the 15th and final piece of advice, it will be a spiritual closing on how to maintain peace, even when life Change completely. But before continuing, pause, breathe, feel what you have learned. Allow each word to settle within you, because everything that comes after will no longer be the same. Only teaching will lead to transformation. I want to close this meeting with a heart full of gratitude. Thank you to have come this far, to have listened with an open soul, to have allowed each word to find a place within you. Today, you're not just taking advice, you're taking a path. A path that reminds you that faith doesn't eliminate problems, but it changes them, the way you face them. Thank you for stopping amidst the noise of the world to listen to a message that didn't. It doesn't come from the mind, but from the heart. Thank you for letting God into this. Final words and reflection. Conversation. For allowing Him to speak to you through these reflections. You know, worry is like a shadow. It only exists as long as you turn your back on the light. And that light is God. When you turn around toward Him, the shadow disappears. Thank you for daring to turn today, for looking towards faith, towards trust, towards calm. If anything you heard, today He touched your heart, not because of my words, but because God wanted to remind you of something you already knew, something you didn't. You are alone. Every piece of advice, every story, every sentence has been a bridge between you, soul, and its presence. And if you manage to feel peace, even for a moment, so this message fulfilled its purpose. Life will continue to bring. There are challenges, but now you have tools, you have clarity, and above all, you have faith. Remember this. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to trust. Don't try to have the control yourself. Seek peace. And when you feel your strength waning, look to the sky and silently repeat, Lord, I trust you. Those 3 words can change your night, your morning, and your destiny. Thank you for being here, for believing, for continuing to learn to let go, and thank you, especially for allowing God to accompany you in this process. Because when God walks with you, worry is transformed into serenity, fear into hope, and uncertainty into peace. In purpose, may His presence surround you, may His peace dwell within you, and may love always be your refuge. Thank you so much for listening, for feeling, and for continue to trust. May God bless you, give you peace, and remind you every day that there is nothing greater than His love and His plan for